It is the Anfield Wrap. It's Neil Atkinson with Jake Nolan, Shaun O'Donnell and Rob Gutmann all here to come. Me and John Gibbons went to Open Door over in Birkenhead to find out what they're up to. And also the Anfield Wrap will be in the United States around Liverpool's tour. So on Thursday the 25th we are in Philadelphia at somewhere called, and I'm saying these places for the first time, The Pitch. On Saturday July the 27th we're bobbing in to Washington because we love it, to go to Exiles Bar. The Absolute Business done 2 great shows there and looking forward to that one. Tuesday the 30th of July we're in Philadelphia at the Brauhaus, and on Friday the 2nd of August we're in Colombia in a place called Tin Roof. Whether or not they'll put us on the tin roof in question is up for discussion and debate when we get there. On the show I want to get into sort of sales rumours that have been bobbing around, and also the backdrop of the last week of June, which appears to be Diddle Week. We'll have a chat about that. That is on its way, but before then we're going to talk about Darwin Nunez. I'm not one, Rob, for the international football in so many ways. I'm not one really for taking lessons from international football. I don't think it always transposes that well. But there is one thing that will always move me and will get me going in life, and that is the harsh reality of goals. Nunez has scored 10 since the start of the 23-24 international season for Uruguay against good sides, Colombia, Brazil, Argentina. He got a hat-trick against Mexico, possible exception of Panama, but that was a competitive game in the Copa America, which he scores in last night or the night before. I'm not 100% on time. The point is that there is a lot to be said for hitting the back of the net with that much regularity. He hasn't done that for Liverpool, but 10 in, I think it's 7, is pretty impressive for Uruguay.
It is. I mean, I think if you go back, as you said, a couple of years, you could see the odd goal for Uruguay, which would buck a trend of maybe going on a drought for Liverpool, and people would be very sort of, don't bore me with that. But I think 10 in 7's a body of work, and that the quality of the opposition you've just listed is a serious body of work that represents. I was a bit disturbed at the trajectory of Darwin's season, not trajectory, the pattern of Darwin's season last year. He went to a point where we were all just absolutely, I think everyone had sort of put away their cynicism. I think it probably peaks at the moment he scores that late goal at Forest. And everyone goes, oh, it's Darwin, he's crazy, he's unpredictable, but the goals are coming. I think that was his last of the season, wasn't it? I think it might as well. Yeah. So it was goal number 18 of a season. And I think at that stage, with about 10 odd games to go, we probably thought he'd finish with 23, 24 goals because he was posting reasonable numbers. But then something happened. Something happened to the entire team. You've said before, Neil, that his form tailed off as much as his goals, and that was the bigger issue. And I agree with that, but I also felt he's criticised an outgoing manager, a legend, but I felt we started playing him in a different way. We started asking him to be our Haaland, to be a guy who just worked within the parameters. Do
you think, just on this, I've said this before, and I thought about Firmino, and Firmino should be the player of whom you say this the least.
Yeah.
But I think there is often with lads who play in the number 9, whether you want to call it a false 9, whatever you want to say about it, Rob, I think there is a thing where lads who play at number 9, the quality of the performances and the goals just tends to be interrelated, i.e. if they're scoring, they're playing with confidence. If they're not scoring, they stop playing with confidence, and that disappears. And I think that there is and I always thought it with Firmino, Klopp would say things like, oh, it doesn't matter if he's not scoring, he contributes so much. But I always felt a bit like saying, yeah, but Jurgen, he plays better when he contributes more when he's scoring. Even if you take the goals away, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, you can say about every footballer on the pitch, even a centre mid who'll only score six. His next 5 will be great after he's scored. But it is obviously particularly true of a number 9. I do remember something was said about Darwin to me by friends in Portugal just after we signed him.
He scores against Sheffield United, by the way. I just wanted to double check. He scores against Sheffield United. But go on.
Oh, yes, he scored. Yeah, the one where he went. He closed it down. But just after we signed him, these friends of mine in Portugal who are Benfica fans and really good hardcore fans who take their football seriously, they'd said to me his first season with us had been tricky after he'd signed from Almeria. But his second season was great, and they felt tactically the big change for him was they played him consistently wide in the first season. Was he worked better in a 2. Now, one thing I do think with Darwin, people go, oh, maybe we should play him left wing or he should be an out-and-out number 9. I think he kind of has to be a hybrid of the 2. And I'd like to watch the Uruguay games and understand how they're using him. There's a lot of him, quite frankly, right? He's like a big racehorse that he needs. He needs space to stretch his legs. So he almost needs to start in a Thierry Henry style position. That's what the kind of forward he is for me. Like Henry, let him pull left. Don't have a winger in his space. Let him move towards the centre of the pitch. When the ball's on the other side, he will arrive, and if he's confident, I think he's got a range of finishes and will score goals. But the wider point is, if he scored 10 in 7 at high-level international, against high-level international opposition, it's a mark of quality that suggests he's not the player that there's been this building narrative around, which is a player who's not a true striker. I think some serious pundits, people I would respect in a lot of realms, have come up with goes, I think we can see what Darwin Nunez is, this crazy, streaky player. We won't see any better than that. It's like something we're waiting to arrive, but it's never going to arrive. We've seen what it is, and if you give him a go next season, you're going to see the same, quite frankly, frustrating patterns re-emerge. I'm not sure that's true, and I think what's happening, I'm saying in a long-winded way, what we're seeing with Uruguay is proof positive that doesn't have to be true, and how you use him, how confident you get him, that is the key to the door.
Yeah, I agree with everything you've said there. I think reflecting on Nunez's season last year, I've thought quite a bit about it because I'm actually a Darwin fan. I think like there's sort of two sides to the coin for Liverpool fans. I feel like at the moment you're either still believe, which is a mad thing to be saying about him, or you've just completely given up, and I haven't given up. I think he's clearly a massively emotional player, and I think it got to the point where there was a tipping point of, you're a football player, you get paid loads of money, you should be able to deal with it, you can score goals and bat it off, to he was clearly that much in his own head that it was having that much of a negative effect. It just tipped everything off, and maybe playing for Uruguay is that release where he doesn't have that sort of emotional baggage weighing him down.
You'd think they're playing for his country. I mean, these games, again, when I went through them, only one of them's a friendly, albeit the hat-trick against Mexico. There's World Cup qualifiers in there, and there's also now this Copa America game. So I would, that's why I was thinking the same thing. Always this a bit. I just
real pressure.
But I also just wonder though, Shaun, whether or not it did become for him a massive emotional hothouse at Liverpool. But again, by virtue of the not scoring, I remember the storming off after Tottenham. When we've won the game, he's been fine. The keeper makes a really good late save against him, but that was when it was in his head. I think it's as much about his performance in his head as anything else, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. I think, and I don't know this because I haven't looked at Uruguay Twitter for a while, but I suspect he doesn't have thousands of people slagging him off in his comments and his DMs or something when he misses a chance for Uruguay, as it did become the thing that happened for Liverpool. It's almost embarrassing, and I think what happened to Darwin towards the end, the way he deleted his Liverpool post, not embarrassing for him doing that, embarrassing that he had to do that, because I think it became like a thing to slag him off. It became like the in thing if you were, an online fan, to just have a go at Darwin. He was the scapegoat almost. And listen, some of it was his own doing through missed chances and being in his own head, and the performances did drop off. I think there's a turning point for Darwin, and I think it was certainly amongst the fans. It felt like at United away, he misses that chance, and I feel like even myself, who's probably the most optimistic Darwin fan, it was very much, this season just needs to end for him. This is it now. And the mood in the away end that day was very much the anger was almost all aimed towards him as opposed to aimed towards the team. So I definitely think, and you can see from the goals for Uruguay, I definitely think he can be the answer for us. I think it's telling that when Paul Joyce announced Arne Slot, Darwin Nunez was in the tweet. Do you know what I mean? And it talks about Arne Slot is going to be back in Darwin Nunez, and he's going to be getting back to turn Darwin Nunez around. It's clear, even though he apparently he wasn't an Edward signing, was he? He was sort of signed by Klopp. I think it's clear that they fancy him and they're going to back him.
Go on.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with that. I think it's not within Liverpool's nature, is it, to sign a forward for that amount and invest, and then to drop it and go from there. And my take on him has been all along is it has felt a little bit square pegs round holes. To pick up on the Rob's point there. And there's not many things that fill me with excitement about losing Jurgen Klopp, and I'm still kind of in the misery of that. But having a new manager with a new sort of impetus and maybe fitting the team around him a little bit more might be all for the benefit. And I've always thought this the whole time he's been here. In as much as he frustrates, you look around the league, who would you swap him for? There's maybe only 2 or 3. I'd say we all and everyone listening would probably think of the same 2, 3. You could stretch 4. I've heard people mention people like Solanke and stuff like that. We watched Solanke, as much as he's improved, I still would swap him for Nunez. So there's the number 9 is probably one of the most important positions in the world, and part of the issue with Darwin, I believe, has been he's brought this pressure upon himself that we've spoken about, and maybe the Uruguay thing is that he just feels more comfortable playing there. Seems like he's got a really good relationship with Suarez, both on and off the pitch, from the bits that you see on social media. It seems like he's a lot more sort of comfortable and with that, maybe he's got the same sort of aggression and passion as the rest of his teammate when he's playing there, like the South Americans do. And ultimately, there's been loads of sort of little human crossroads, hasn't there? The headbutt, the missed chances, and even I think one of the big things that hasn't been spoken about enough, which shows you the pair of plums that he's got on him, is he took the number 9 shirt. He was number 27, I think I'm right in saying, and he took that on, which I think there's a lot of other players who'd have gone, Liverpool number 9, that much pressure. Bobby Firmino leaving that, I'm all right, I'll miss it out.
It's striking to me he's doing this for Uruguay, working with Bielsa, and Bielsa is a very, very, professorial coach. On the emotion sort of point, I wonder if we're all honest about it, we're emotional full stop. I think that last season we'd hit, I think, a really good emotional pitch by January. The manager news breaks, and I think that we actually all ride it out really, really well until the moment where it begins to go wrong. And then that's interesting that sort of coincides with, Shaun mentions Old Trafford, and I think he's got a point. Yeah. I think his second half at Goodison Park's amongst the worst second halves I've ever seen a Liverpool player play. First half, he has really hard lines. Pickford makes a great save, and I think he's in the game and he's very involved. Second half, he might as well have been a ghost, to be honest with you, Jake. And I think that's where his head's burnt out completely, because it's like, this isn't going for me. Everything's going wrong. League's getting away from us. This fella's lead. I wonder if the fresh start element with someone who just comes in and just reminds him he's just playing football, and if he stands here and runs here and does this, he'll find the ball will drop to him and he'll find he can just calmly put it into the back of the net. I wonder if that might just be the making of him a little bit, and it could just calm, in the same way I think it could help calm a few players. Seasons are emotional, but they're only really meant to be emotional at the end, not all the way through.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what, Neil, this is going to sound really, really basic, and I make no apologies for it, but there's a lot of forwards who are crap that just score loads of goals, and there's a lot of good forwards who don't score many goals, and I think he's probably somewhere in between that. Genuinely, I do. And I think if he did the work that he did last season, but potentially one of the other forwards scored a bit more, and we had a little bit more success and something, I don't even think we'd be speaking about it that much. I really don't.
I think Jota doesn't get injured at Brentford.
Yeah.
That's one of the ones I think. I think if Jota doesn't get injured at Brentford, I think it all potentially looks very, very different, and these conversations are very different.
And they had a nice relationship sort of cooking up for that period as well. I mean, there's the assist at Brentford, isn't there, which is, by the way, one of the best assists that I've ever seen in my life. I can't believe we don't talk about it more. I want it tattooed on my back. And and things were good there, weren't they? You talking about Glastonbury before we come on here, that kind of felt like Friday night at Glastonbury at that point, didn't it? And then by the time we got to the end of the season, it was very much Sunday night, and things are getting a bit more sloppy.
I do wonder with Darwin if the Klopp magic was a bit lost on him, and not because of the language barrier as much as anything. Klopp was sort of frustrated with him. I think that he hadn't learnt the language, which I thought was a little harsh. None of us ever want. We always give Klopp the benefit of the doubt, and rightly so. Klopp could go, it's raining and it's sunshine. He goes, well, maybe it is raining, but you know what I mean. But when he came out and said, I don't think he's really learnt, he implied that he needed to learn the language. It's fine, but it's hard. Some brains connect better with language learning than others.
You couldn't have a forward any different than Bobby Firmino as well, than Darwin Nunez. That was the thing that surprised me when we signed him.
I just wonder, no fault of either man particularly, but I just want, Klopp is the most incredible manager, and we take it as a given, 90% of players will connect and react to him. But if there's a language barrier, all the big white teeth and hugs in the world don't necessarily translate. And I think when things, and also let's remind ourselves, he didn't come in a mid-price like a Mane and a Salah, who didn't come in under pressure. Yeah. He came in as the direct comparison to Erling Haaland, for better or for worse. He was burdened.
Comparison that as well.
He was burdened from day one with opposition supporters shouting shit Andy Carroll just because of his physicality and his price, quite frankly. But it led to the modern culture, the modern banter culture of football supporters. I think Liverpool supporters, especially the online supporter base, felt very either the need to defend or to overcompensate to that criticism. I think that's what this toxic culture around him's come from, because he's just so polarising, and I think our fans have bought into this, and it's become such a sort of fevered thing around the board. And he's really quite young. He's moved country. He's got a young family, as we said, and throw into that mix, he's emotional. I think if you can, I know we've said this all along, but if you can just harness these things, if you can have these 7 games for Liverpool and 10 goals, then fucking hell.
It's 25 today. Andy's just pointed out to me there is something, Rob, with it, where the other part of it is the extent to which from day one I think, and again, this is the emotional point, he's been entirely bought in. So you go, for instance, you can draw a line at the Carvalho Newcastle winner, which is Nunez isn't even in the 11, or he can't be on the bench because he's suspended. So he's not even part of it, but he's there.
Yeah.
He's prominent. And then you look at the League Cup final when Van Dijk scores and those scenes. That's not a I'm focused only on my game, my fitness, my health. And those players do exist. And by the way, I've got nothing against them. Those players, fair play. If that's the sort of footballer you are, and then you go and get those results. But the point was, he was absolutely fucking delighted Liverpool were winning on both occasions. Both occasions elicit the response of a fan. And I think that's something which, as I say, it may even be in the long run for him or for us, it could be counterproductive. Maybe he needs to go to the sort of football club where he is the most emotional person by a mile and not the idea that he's just in with the rest of us because we're all like this all the time. But that to me says, his commitment has been wholehearted. Regardless of any other little bits and pieces, you don't react like he does in the League Cup final unless you absolutely love your teammates at the very, very least.
Do you know the best comparison to him is, if I think about it, in our Liverpool watching lives, Luis Suarez. And there's maybe no accident they're the same nationality and the teammates. But the same thing. Luis Suarez was different in as much as we loved what he was doing on the pitch from the get-go. But there was a lot of ups and downs, to put it mildly. The incident with Evra, the biting. I mean, and he wasn't that prolific for his first 2.5 years. He was getting the goals, and obviously the assists were there, and we still all loved. But
he was also very good at hitting the post, which Nunez is. Yeah,
but it did take a while for him to hone all the passion, the passion, the anger, to channel that all into something really, really productive. And boy, was it worth the wait. And let's put it this way: it may never happen with Darwin Nunez, maybe get sold before this. But if there's a universe where it does happen, it's really clear to see why it was always going to happen.
I don't think much sort of needs to change in a way, Shaun. The comparison I keep coming back to is Drogba, and people don't like that comparison, not least because I think that he's much more of an enigmatic footballer than is given credit for. People will say things like, but Drogba scored a lot of big goals, to which last season I feel like saying, so what was Newcastle away and Forest away?
Yeah.
But there's the breadth of Drogba's career. There's not a season where Drogba gets between 20 and 30 all comps. He either gets in the teens or he gets over 30 when he was at Chelsea. That's what he got. And that's, and I think there's a chance, for instance, I'll keep saying it, there's a chance that Nunez puts it all together for a season where, this is all sorted, and the following season he gets 14. And we're all looking at each other like, wasn't that all meant to be sorted? Yeah. But there's I think that, you look at the numbers, the underlying stats, he's got the second highest expected goals per 90, the highest number of shots per 90. This is the Premier League. Post-shot expected goals, he's 9th. Combined expected goals and assists, he's 4th in the league. That stuff does not happen if you're not fully involved in things around the penalty area. And that to me I see that as a massive positive, but I also see how if it doesn't go well, it burns your head out. And I think that, and it burns our heads out as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think just by default, having the most shots is going to mean you're probably going to miss the most as well, because they don't all go in. Do you know what I mean? I remember there was a period sort of when we were probably playing our best football last year, and Nunez was part of that, in my opinion. And it wasn't when he was scoring goals. He was just sort of, and the conversation was around, well, he occupies your defender, so he frees up space for the other attackers to go and do their thing. And it was when we were sort of piecing it together, because there's a time last season, and I think it's obviously after the Newcastle goals were early on, but he's not starting regularly then, but he forces himself into the team and he becomes first choice, number 9, and he sort of, you can't get the shirt off him for a good while, probably until he gets injured around that time. And it's like he was Klopp, even though we're saying it might not have clicked and it might have just sort of got off piece with Klopp. Klopp was backing him, so Klopp was putting him there. Klopp was playing him and prepared to do so. And I think it just comes back to where Nunez got himself to in his own head, that he sort of unravelled it a little bit. The Drogba comparison's interesting, certainly from a numbers point of view, because I'm surprised to hear that Drogba had sort of scored in the teens and stuff. But he was someone who definitely occupied defenders, wasn't he? And I think that if you can sort of harness the fact that Nunez is not going to be your Haaland that just stands there and taps it in, but actually there's a lot more to his game, which we see, and as I say, in my opinion, when we're playing our best football, then I think there's every reason why we should back him, to be honest.
All right, moving along, we'll get into some sales rumours. Start at one end and sort of end up a little bit at the other. I've been intrigued by this, Jake. I think because we ended up with injuries last season, there's extended periods where it just feels like we haven't got enough players. I think it's sort of forgotten that we've got a lot of players. And I do think that, that we're going to talk here about some who are on loan, some who haven't necessarily contributed that much as well. But they do need to have homes found for them, and it wouldn't surprise me if there's one or two others of the first team squad. There are 5 forwards. Carvalho is coming back. There was a lot of Ben Doak chat last season at times. There's Cade Gordon was putting himself back in the mix, so we ended up with Jayden Dans. They're your attacking options. That's a fair number. Then you go back into midfield, Tyler Morton to come back in on top of the idea that Bajcetic gets himself to full fitness, but also we've lost Thiago out of that over the course of the campaign, but other players have asserted themselves, and then within there was McConnell and there was Bobby Clark as well, and then at the back Vandenberg was playing top flight football over in Germany, but not obviously at the level I don't think that Liverpool necessarily want. Gomez asserts himself, Matip has gone, but Shimikas, for instance, remains with a question mark over his head, and even in goal you're in a situation where Kelleher has shown enough to make an argument that he's a Premier League goalkeeper. My point here is that without necessarily, gilding the lily and saying that it's the best squad Liverpool have ever had, I think that's 21-22, you're in a situation where you can say, well, it's quite a heavy one with players who need football, so they will need to make, I think, a few exits, whether it is loans or permanent deals, for a number of the players I've just mentioned and maybe more.
Yeah, I mean the whole kind of setup in a lot of ways is you touched on it. There is a lot of question marks, and that's the thing that does fill me with a little bit of anxiety. Is that I couldn't sit here, hand on heart, and knowing a little bit about football and following it for long enough. Normally you get a sense, you get a sniff about how a team's going to perform and going into a new season. I've got no idea. I genuinely haven't. Like if you told me now that Liverpool were going to finish in the Europa League places, I could probably believe you. If you told me that we mounted the title charge and we weren't far away, we were within a whisker, I'd probably believe you as well. I genuinely don't know, and I think that a lot of that has got, obviously we got the new manager, but you look at in nearly enough every position, there is a question mark, and I think obviously that starts with the goalkeeper. I mean, I know it's not the biggest thing, because you think, we've got one of the best goalies in the world. What are you talking about, question marks? But he has had a lot of injuries, and for me, being the hamstring and being a goalie is a tricky one, and tell you, you're doing a lot of kicking, and your hammies suffer from that. I'm a testament to that. I've got a little bit older these days, and you've got this fella knocking on the door who is homegrown, who has shown to be a top level goalie, not as consistent as you would, and I think especially for the data boys, not necessarily for the touch and the field boys, but especially for the data boys, I think they will be looking at it going, there's value to be done there. If we were to make a decision in the next year or two with Alisson, and then you go right through the pitch, don't you? And like you said, probably the most consistent defender for me, bar Van Dijk, is Joe Gomez. But Joe Gomez has had 2 or 3 career-threatening injuries, and you still can't really hang your hat on him. And then, as I said, you move through the pitch. We're going to play slightly different shape. Is Trent going to go and sit in midfield? I don't want to see much more of that, to be honest with you, after watching England. And then, you've got Mo Salah. Where does he play next season? We've just spoken about Nunez. So there is just tons and tons of variables, and it does kind of fill me with anxiety, to be honest with you, Neil.
Before we get in to those specific outs, I think Jake's point's really, really good, in that one of the things I think is I don't think Liverpool necessarily need to go and buy the sort of dominant defensive midfield that everyone would love there to be, not least because I don't necessarily think that player easily exists, and I think that you end up compromising other values, especially if you're going to play 2 in there. But I think it's a perfectly valid argument, Rob. I'm not going to sit here and go, well, that's fucking... My point here is that if it's 4-2-3-1, you can make a pretty strong argument, especially if Kelleher's going to go. If that makes it 1-4-2-3-1, you could do possibly with another 1. You could do possibly with someone else in the 4. You could possibly do with someone else in the 2. You could do with someone else in the 3. And depending on your point of view on Nunez, Jota, fitness, etc., you could maybe do with somebody else in the 1. And simultaneously, this squad mounted the title challenge until end of March, start of April. Went deep in all 3 cup competitions that it can win in one of them, and could simultaneously, to Jake's point, if they didn't do that much, you wouldn't absolutely be staggered if they managed to get 88 points or something like that. It is a bit... as ever, it feels with Liverpool, it does feel like a little bit like a squad on a tightrope. We'll get into the outs in a minute, but that is it's a fair and valid point.
Yeah, you can make really directly polar opposite cases to needing lots of transfers and also to none. I mean, I remember, I think at the height of our title charge giddiness, maybe in February, I was tweeting about, I said, I actually can see us buying no one in the summer. And although I don't entirely stand by that, I still know what I meant. Because any of our existing squad in form, and they're mainly quite young and progressing, you go, where are we going to get better? They're all good fits. We go backwards and forwards in the transfer shows we do about the need for the defensive midfielder, who's going to play on the double pivot. And it makes sense if someone goes, I don't know, who's an example of it could be available.
Well, you could literally fucking buy Rodri. If you could buy Rodri, you'd buy Rodri.
Well, say Tchouaméni genuinely becomes a live possibility. He's the sort of the fantasy one, I think, even 1% realistic. So he becomes available. I think everyone will suddenly put down their arguments and go, yeah, let's have him. End of story. But at the same token, someone says we can't get him, I can talk myself into an axis of McAllister and Trent or Curtis and whatever. And I know a lot of people will wince, and you and I have talked about whether Dom Szoboszlai could play 6. So you can talk yourself into it at every turn. And I'm just not sure. But I do think about the Arsenal team that sort of was running City close 2 years ago but fell short. I think there are possibly reasonable comparisons to be made between that Arsenal of 2 seasons ago with the Liverpool of last season. And you could sort of go, they made 1.5 transformative signings, and it did take them that significantly bit closer. They got their Declan Rice, and Kai Havertz, I think, proved to be an astute signing, and he was a top expensive.
Jorginho as well, great signing.
And Jorginho. So they bought big and they bought well in a squad that was pretty decent to start with. They could have told themselves they didn't necessarily need signings. I mean, you can always tell yourself need signings. Let's go back to the narrative around Arsenal at the beginning, early part of last season is this Arsenal team will go nowhere without a striker. Suddenly, goals not an issue in the second half of the season at all without a striker coming in. So it's very, very difficult, as you said, Shaun, to know where the land actually lies.
Do you know what the biggest thing for me is? And I was thinking about it when you were talking there, and I guess this sort of ties into potential outs as well. It gets forgotten how bad our injury record was last year. We were literally in a position where we were absolutely battered. The League Cup final is the biggest and best example of that. The fact that we're talking about, Bobby Clark and obviously Tyler Morton wasn't there last season, but we're talking about that type of player as if they're sort of in and around the first team because you've got memories of them playing a decent part last year. That's purely down to the state of our injury crisis that we had, and I do think it is a crisis looking back. If someone said to me right now, you've got a choice next season, you can either have a 100% fitness record for your squad or you can go and sign 2 or 3 of these type of players, I'd probably take the 100% fitness record because I do think the squad is that good. I think that just think about the forward line and keeping those all fit and having those options every week. We very rarely had options to make changes apart from sort of that period where, as I say, towards the start to the middle of the season where Klopp's using his subs really well and he's using he's making almost 3 changes on 60 minutes and it really is changing things up. That was almost our cheat code for a part last season, and we sort of got to a position where we ran out of the options to be able to do that because our injury record was so bad. So it's up for debate whether that's within your control or not. A lot of talk is that Klopp's pressing style and the way they train with so much intensity is the reason for all these injuries. You have to, you can't really deny that. You have to look at it and say there must be something in that. But I do still think there's an element of it being out of our control. So I don't know if you're saying to us, look, can you go on?
The one thing I think, Shaun, on a full stop is that injury spiral. So I think you saw it with United last season. I think you saw it for Newcastle for a period. You saw it with us the year before, and I think it felt cleaner to see it the year before. It's a point that Rob always makes, which is that whenever you think you're at the end of an injury crisis, you can always find one more because suddenly players are being overplayed and there's more onus on them all the time. And I do think that I think that the having lived now 2 seasons of this and arguably 3 under Klopp, because you've also got 2020, 2021 as well during COVID. And as I say, seeing other sides go through it last season in a really clear way after they played more games than they expected the season before, I think that there's a lot to be. I almost feel a little bit like if you've got a clean body of health if you had a pretty clean body of health by the end of October, realistically you're going to have a pretty clean body of health by the end of February. If you've had a bad run by the end of October, the smart money is you're probably going to take until the end of January before you began to get a grip of the problem and bring it back around. And I think that's sort of your prognosis.
It's a really good point actually, because it's something you don't think about, do you? Because obviously the further you go into an injury crisis, the more sort of you're on that tightrope of it becoming worse and worse. So and as I say, listen, if you're gonna, you were speaking even just about Alisson's fitness there before. I think that's a valid point as well, because he obviously is, as we all, I'm sure, would agree, the best goalie in the world. You know what I mean? But does Kelleher play more games than last season? I think it's close, and that's not a situation you want to be going into. Certainly when you're talking about that, Kelleher wants to go because he wants to become a number one somewhere. Obviously Adrian is looking like he's going to be going as well. So I think there's a lot of question marks.
I don't know really why Kelleher. No, I do know why he wants to go, but I have to say, if I was his dad, I would say, have a think, son. Have a proper think. Being a keeper for Liverpool, did Barca have the two keepers competing in competitions, Ter Stegen and
Bravo,
right?
Yeah.
They reached a point, a reasonably happy point where both were having interesting seasons. I'm not saying Kelleher can't bank on Alisson being the same level of injuries, but there's a body of work for Alisson that says you get a game.
I think what undermines that argument now is last season there was the Europa League.
Yeah.
And I think that's go on. Yeah, I think that's what that makes it. Unless you're going to actually say to Kelleher, guaranteeing you a minimum of 2 Champions League games because the Swiss system, you play the top 40. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I think you'd end up then you get in the League Cups. We might even look at bottom 5 at home. Almost set a rule and go, this is what the offer is. But I feel as though he'll want. I think it's not unreasonable if you're a goalkeeper to want to go somewhere.
That's not unreasonable.
That was their deal as well, wasn't it? The Ter Stegen Bravo one. That was like the first of its kind at the time, and it was like Ter Stegen used to play the cup games, and then Bravo played the league games, and then there was a transition over a year or two where Ter Stegen took over. And I just don't think that they're quite at the same trajectory, and I don't think you're realistically sitting in front of Alisson saying, "I'm not going to pick you against Real Madrid if we draw you in the Champions League." And I think ultimately that's where they are, aren't they? And if especially if they're thinking that they've got other eyes and other people, then there's decisions to be made.
But I think it's in Liverpool's interest to try and sway that argument, because I don't think you're going to get a number 2 as good as Kelleher, who's going to give you. Well, Jaros we don't know yet.
No, we don't know with Jaros, but I think it's worth pointing out Jaros' second half of the season. He's in the Czech squad now in the Euros. He won the cup with Sturm Graz. Got games for them in the Europa Conference. He goes in January. He starts every game. When he gets there, Jaros, when he goes to Sturm Graz, he's Czech, but Sturm Graz are obviously in Austria. I think there's possibly a diddle for Liverpool, Rob, in terms of the idea of cashing in on sub-keepers. Certainly whilst you've got Alisson, Liverpool can get some good money in for Kelleher, and that would then also go to Cork as well. Some of that would do. It looks like Adrian's going to go. I do worry, though, a little bit that to the Alisson gets injured point, you are basically there saying if it comes to it, it will have to be Jaros, I think.
How old's Jaros now? Is he
21.
He's 21, okay.
So I don't think there's...
It's the Champions League that makes me nervous. And as much as I'm so happy to be back in it, and if you ask me now, I do think it's our best, take away the other cup competitions, our best sort of route to glory still. But it's a new format, isn't it?
Yeah, in games, and then there might be 10 before you even get to the last 16.
Exactly, and you've spoken there about, the fact that we have got a bloated squad on the surface of things, but I would argue there's a lot of sort of injuries within that. There's a lot of sort of variables within that, and playing in that tournament this season, we don't know what we're going to get. That could, we've got players who are going over the age of 30.
And every game counts. Van Dijk.
Yeah, I think the Europa League was great for Van Dijk last season because he could kind of have 1 foot in, 1 foot out. He could have the rest. The same with some of the forwards as well. So. Yeah, as much as I'm so happy to be back in it, and I do think we attack it. We've got with Liverpool FC, we've got to attack it sort of full force. But I do worry with this squad. I do really worry about
the depth of it? Do you worry about
the depth and the injury record? And I'm sure every fan would say the same, and every fan would improve. But I think one of the reasons we get so many injuries is we still rely on the same. We rely on a certain amount of intensity, and we rely on really the same 4 or 5, 6 players really, and we run them into until they can't run anymore.
Well, it is a crisis issue for Liverpool, because going into last season, we talked about doing transfer shows again. We talked about players with, and all the stuff that came out of Liverpool is they look for players with certain appearance records who aren't missing swathes of games. We want to buy non-injury prone players. Brilliant, we did. We bought Dom Szoboszlai and Endo and Gravenberch, etc., etc. McAllister. Everyone got, none of them got terrible injuries, but they all got niggles. Szoboszlai's had an incredible appearance record, had 2 quite significant periods out.
McAllister gets an impact injury at Sheffield United.
His legs fall off last 10 games as well.
And his legs fall, and when they fall off, they fucking hell.
But this is the problem. Salah had never missed a bloody game, but virtually had never missed a game for Liverpool, and he's out for a big swathe. Trent's barely ever injured. He missed a big swathe.
This is where they have hard lines, and this is back to so I take Jake's concern. Salah's injuries playing for Egypt. Robertson's injury is playing for Scotland, and it's a fucking dislocated shoulder. Shimmikas, who's covering for Robertson's, his injury is
taken out by Klopp.
Is taken out by Klopp when he's fouled by Saka.
That's when he put his notice in, by the way.
Yeah,
like,
you've also then in the context of that, you lose Diaz to kidnapping for an extent. You know, when you begin to sort of, you know, open brackets kidnapping, close brackets, 3 weeks. When you begin to go
transfer
through,
marked,
there is, and this is why it's difficult to sort of assess. But I think, you know, in amongst the assessment of it, it is 8 Champions League games. It could be 2 more. There is the reality, and I think that you get to see it a little bit on the international stage, of the rigours of having to deal with the fact that Brentford finishing 15th or 16th, and Ivan Toney and Brian Mbeumo are 2 of the best attackers in Europe. It's hard, this. And I think that this is, for me, to Jake's point is around Liverpool's injuries and the squad. For me, it's my biggest slot concern. Not because I think he's a stupid man, but because until you've lived one of these, like Guardiola's first season at City, it's not great. Until you've lived one of these, I think and with the injuries and the turmoil of it all, Rob, and the ups and the downs and the emotion that we've talked about as well, but on top of all of that, just the sheer intensity of the fixture list, the way in which it goes, the schedule in this season with the additional Champions League games, I think Liverpool need to make sure they're giving him the best possible chance, is my point.
Well, last season, if you think about it, the first half, it looked like we were managing games really quite well. We were actually managing to make 9-10 changes for Europe and the League Cup, etc. Players were getting plenty of rest. Salah wasn't playing 2 games a week. Van Dijk was getting rested. It all seemed to change for me when... Do you remember... maybe I'm imagining this, but Klopp's... There was a point where Klopp, even though we'd had a good first third of the season, there's a point where Klopp said, things changed. I felt I got my old Liverpool back, he more or less said, in other words. And it was when we played Man U at Anfield, it was 0-0. But we put them through the washing machine, as Arteta called it, for the first half hour. And then you saw that again and again and again in subsequent games. Suddenly it felt like Liverpool 2018 again, then 2019. The press was there, the pressure was there. But that intensity seemed to also then coincide with players dropping like flies with... they were all hamstring. Whether Salah falls away for Egypt or not, it's still a hamstring injury, which is a repetitive strain injury. Alexander-Arnold, something similar. Szoboszlai, something similar. And then what happens is they all get brought back too early. So whether that's mismanagement,
we had a set 11 or 12 at that point though, and then when they started dropping like flies, you know, the sort of the cogs. And that, you know, that is kind of my point. It's like Liverpool's first 11-12 players amongst the best in the world. I think after that, there's too many question marks.
Yeah.
Okay, coming up next is Open Door with John Gibbons. We'll get on to some of those players who might be making a move in a minute or two, but me and John Gibbons went to Open Door in Birkenhead to find out the work that they do there, the event space that they've got. It was all very, very interesting indeed. Neil Atkinson here in the Bloom Building to speak to Dave Hatton from Open Door Charity, based out of the Bloom Building. We're going to talk to you about the building, what it's about, what goes on here, but we're also going to talk about its core purpose as part of the Open Door Charity over in Birkenhead. So Dave, let's start there really. What is the work that Open Door looks to do?
So Open Door Charity is a mental health support charity. We're based in the Wirral, but we sort of act all over Merseyside. We offer several different support options, whether that's sort of talk therapies through Bazaar, which is a one-to-one program. The way that we do things is everything is free, everything's without waiting lists. We want people to be able to find the support as quickly as possible. We know there's sort of issues across the whole of the country in terms of people having to wait to receive support, so we're trying to supplement that in terms of offering something that people can get as soon as they need it.
And you do stuff also in person here. So there's a room in the back that you've shown me, which Monday to Thursday is full of people doing sessions in person, one-to-one, or also as a group.
Yeah, so all the sessions are, that we have there, so we have Bazaar, which is our main offering, but we also offer colours for stress support, and we are also looking to introduce MISA, which is our eating disorder support programme. That's been a support group up until now. But now we're looking to do that on a one-to-one basis. Everything we do in terms of all of those programs is evidence-based. So we want everything to be based on lived experience. We want the people who use our programs to then feed back to us and basically create the programs and develop the programs as they move. So everything we have now is based off everything that's come before.
And as part of that, with what you have sort of back there as a facility, it's about also integrating everything into this space, into this building as well. It feels as though, you know, it's very much sort of every phase of this building feels as though it builds to that. You gave me a tour just before, and it does build to that sort of private space that people can go to. And also you've shifted the age range of this recently as well, so it goes down to 14-year-olds too.
Yeah, so just based on that first point, everything we do is completely non-clinical. So like I say, we supplement those more clinical routes with a non-clinical feel. So as you can see with the backdrop, this is completely different from where people would normally expect to access mental health support. So everything we want to do wants to feel like that. When we pair you off with a mentor, we make sure we're finding someone that you, as we say peer mentors. So someone who's your peer, someone particularly we kind of look at your interests and try and pair you off with someone with similar interests, so you have something to talk about that isn't necessarily just within the confines of mental health. And we just try and offer that something different that people want to access. You know, we find that a lot of people come here and they say, this is the thing that works, this is like nothing else I've ever received, like no support that I've ever seen. And we really try and push that to everyone, that this is something different. Just based on that second point, we as a charity, throughout our history, we've quite often sort of had that age range down to the, sort of the lower to the 14. Recently, in the last few years, I think since we've been at Bloom, we did change that to 17. Now we're deciding to go back down to 14. It's something we've always done, it's something we're prepared to do. We're looking forward to it.
And the space as a whole, this space, obviously it's the space that you work out of, but it also gets used as an event space. It's a functioning bar here in Birkenhead as well. I've got that there. The space first and foremost is gorgeous, but also you're able to hire it out, gigs, plays, weddings. That's what you're looking to do in the building ongoing as much as possible.
Yeah, it's an incredibly versatile space. So while we've got the back, which we have the sessions, like you say, Monday to Thursday, we also use this main space for pretty much anything you can imagine. So we regularly have weddings here that are booked, we have gigs, we have events, sort of electronic music events, things like that. Pretty much anything, like I say, anything you can imagine, plays, comedy nights. We're always looking to collaborate with people, so if they want to come in to the space and do something with us, if they just want to rent the space to put on their own event, we're always happy to do any of those things, and everything that goes behind the bar, all the money, all the booking fees, all goes back into helping us continue to give free, fast and effective mental health support.
In general, you mentioned there about collaborating. It strikes me, for instance, there's a wall of flyers here that this is part of a little bit of a shift in the way in which Birkenhead or the Wirral Peninsula is perceived. There's obviously the fantastic stuff that's going on at Future Yard, but it isn't the only thing. It feels to me whenever I come over here at the minute, which is quite often, there is a bit of a shift that's been in train for the last 3 or 4 years. That Birkenhead, to me, it feels a bit younger than I think I've ever thought it in the past, and it feels as though there is a real sort of sense of a burgeoning cultural scene here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's definitely a growing musical scene here. There's like you say, you know, a young scene. There are young people that live here. I think often there might have been that push sort of across the water sort of thing, but here we're trying to make a place that people want to go to. I think this building in itself, because we have the mental health support, sometimes people think it's just a mental health space, but half the battle is getting people into the room. Once they're here, they realise what we do, and whether that's for a gig or whether that's an event, you get a feel for it. I mean, I feel like I think you've been here before, right? But being here, I'm sure you can. Again, you can sort of see what it is. Once you're here, you kind of get a feel for exactly what it is we do. And yeah, absolutely. I think Birkenhead is definitely there's a lot of sort of rejuvenation going on. There's definitely a need for people like us, which is obviously sad in the first aspect, that there is such a need for mental health support in this area. But we are here and we are doing what we're doing, which is definitely a positive.
And it's John Gibbons now with Ella, who's head of fundraising here at Open Door. And Ella, we've heard all about the fantastic space we've seen it. I've been down before a couple of years ago, but it's nice to see how you guys have developed. We want to keep it going. We want to help you continue to offer these fantastic services. Part of your role is making sure that happens.
Yeah, totally. So I think for us, we're in the midst of kind of, okay, how can we do things differently? How can we diversify our income? Because at the moment, you know, I think amongst loads, it's a problem really in the charity sector around being totally reliant on grants. You know, grants are kind of, you can put an application out to the world, you might not get that money back and that kind of funding to kind of carry on that impact. So for us and kind of for my world as well, we're looking at really, okay, how can we involve community members, you know, members, supporters of our work to kind of keep that longevity and that sustainability of, you know, the incredible, impactful stuff that we're doing.
So how can people support you then? That's the question. First of all, sort of locally, you know, if people are nearby, first of all, how can they sort of, you know, help support what you guys do?
Yeah, so we're really looking at kind of increasing this at the moment, John, in terms of, you know, we really want kind of like whether you're a grassroots footy team, whether you're a school, youth club, just kind of using your own initiative to support us, because we've never really delved into this before, and it's something kind of we want to do strategically to kind of increase those donations and, like I said before, kind of ensure that this impactful work can carry on. So whether, like I said, you want to do a skydive, marathons, half marathons, whatever you want to do.
And people can hire the space, people can come down and support you in that way as
well.
well.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, we are a CIO, which means kind of everything we do socially trading wise in the building, kind of 100% of that surplus and that profit goes straight back into the charity. So whether it's a wedding party, 100% of that fund goes straight back into supporting everything we do.
I will say the coffee is exceptional. I was just sort of saying that before. So if you want to come down and have a cup of coffee, you will not be you will not be disappointed there. And people further afield then, because, you know, people who are watching this, you know, might be from the area who've moved away or have some sort of special bond and think, you know, it's a bit trickier for them. You know, if they go online, is the signposting there to donate? Yeah,
definitely. So that's a really good point to touch on, really, in terms of, you know, we have donors that are not based in Merseyside, but have kind of a really strong connection to either Merseyside or mental health. Maybe it's their child's mum, dad, whoever partner that's suffering with their mental health. So yeah, kind of one-off donations, or even better, regular donations through the website.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we would encourage everyone to do that. It is a fantastic space. What they're doing is incredible, and I'm sure you'd like to do much more as well. That's the thing, isn't it? Because it's not just keeping going, it's growing. I'm sure you're all full of ideas of things that you could be doing with a little bit more support.
I mean, that's it, isn't it? You know, you've got to have the funding to kind of make sure you can remain, you know, free, immediate and effective, but also kind of that wiggle room to be creative and innovative at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, do support wherever you can, but thanks so much for welcoming us down today. We do really appreciate it.
Nice one, John.
Thank you very much to Open Door for that. I mentioned before the US tour shows in Pittsburgh, Washington, Philly and Columbia. Really excited for them. It should be a big summer. Who's on that tour is up in the air. We've touched on the goalkeeper, Adrian Kelleher, Jaros and Allison. Shaun, Bobby Clark loan chat. I will ride for Bobby Clark until the bitter end. But I do think Salzburg is interesting for the obvious reasons. Norwich just been mentioned as well. Others could emerge. I think if there isn't a pathway for... If they've had a conversation and they don't think there's a clean pathway for Clark to be getting 20 appearances for Liverpool in this coming season, he looks to me ready to play football. He starts at Nottingham Forest. I think he needs to go somewhere as good as Liverpool can make it and be getting himself 40 appearances at the highest level we can get him.
Yep, completely agree. And, you know, I think... Listen, I really want Bobby Clark to do well. I think the first and foremost, that's an important thing to point out. But I think if Bobby Clark's getting 20 appearances next season, that means Liverpool probably are having a tough time when it comes to injuries. So that's probably what I don't want to see, if that makes sense. So, let's hope he gets somewhere good. Let's hope he gets to play some games. I think, you know, it's showed that, you know, for someone like Bobby Clark, because you look at these players and they still look like young lads, don't they? They don't look like they're fully physically developed, and maybe, you know, it'd be nice to see that on someone else's watch. You know, with the greatest respect in the world, as I say, I really want Bobby Clark to do well. I really want him to do well for Liverpool. I just think he's probably at that stage where he needs to go and play consistently to get that experience where he can come back and really feel like he's a proper first team player. I think it'll be interesting to see how they react to Slot, because Klopp was obviously famously really good with the young players. It'll be interesting to see if
used a lot of young players for finals.
Yeah. Well, brilliant. That's good, and that's nice and reassuring to hear. It'll be interesting to see how they sort of take to a new manager coming in, because Klopp is the famous arm around them, isn't he? He's the hug at full time. He's the all sort of encompassing smiling fella. And Slot does a lot of smiling, by the way. But but it's just it'll be interesting to see how that happens. But yeah, for me, let's get him somewhere good. Let's let him go on loan, and let's hope that we can have a nice fresh injury record.
Yeah, for all the moaning I've just done for the past 10-15 minutes about the state of Liverpool's squad and the question marks, is I think one of the good things that Slot's going to bring is a fresh new impetus, and from catching up on the tactics on some of the other shows and things like that, the idea of a 4-2-3-1 is, I think I could actually see a point where Bobby Clark does get actually a lot of football, in sort of being the number 2 in sort of 2 or 3 different positions there. And like I said, the increase of cup competitions, and I take your point in terms of not really wanting to get to, but if he does kick on, then he's certainly got a lot of potential. So it'd be an interesting one with him, and for one or two others in a similar boat. He's almost kind of like our Emile Smith-Rowe, isn't he? Like our version of what Arsenal have got there. Maybe with City had it similar with Palmer, and Palmer's kicked on because he's moved away, and Emile Smith-Rowe's kind of stagnated when he looked great at the start. So I think for his own individual sense, he's got big decision to make. But with the options that we've got currently, unless we bring in 1 or 2 players, I'd like to see him stay, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see him stay. I don't think he's not at the level of Emile Smith-Rowe or Cole Palmer got to at their clubs yet. But he's young. Is he hit 19?
19, yeah.
He's hit 19. So I think he probably needs another season. I mean, I think Jarrell Quansah and Conor Bradley will be the 2 he should look to. They clearly took themselves to a level above their peers, didn't they, last season?
Both were preceded by loans.
Both were preceded by loans. Yeah, I'm not against the idea that the Bobby Clark gets loans, but it might be that give him till January, see what happens. You never know. Look, at the start of the season, we've got players coming back late who might not be ready. There's the Olympic thing. Does that affect a few? You don't know.
I can't conceive of the Olympic thing,
I know. I feel bad even mentioning it to upset younger viewers.
It ruins everything.
It does, doesn't it? Because do you remember there was that season where suddenly we had to process not having Luis Suarez to start the season, even though he was fully fit, just cause Olympics. I think we had him as a sub the first game of the season in the end, but
I'm just like, fuck off.
Yeah. Do you remember that Great Britain team that Sturridge played in? And had like a Union jacket?
Yeah, that's a relief. We at least haven't got that to worry about. I just can't.
Is Salah in the Olympics?
Well, no one knows, and the thing is, they'll probably want him to be in the Olympics because he's Salah, and it's the only tournament of the year. And
he might have to go and get his ear filled in round about that time.
He might have worked. Salah, though, I just sort of get the impression Salah himself will probably just rather not. But will probably feel obliged because it's Egypt, and it's, you know what I mean. Like that's almost why it does my head, and I feel like I almost feel at times a little bit like Salah's not entirely convinced he should be going to AFCON anymore.
No, I agree.
I think he's got the vague. It's not quite like, that's not to talk that tournament down at all. I've seen it with other players, like Milner retires from international football early. Salah to me vaguely has the air of, I'd quite like to be able to not do this, but I'm sort of obliged to without it being a major thing.
I think he would, in an ideal world, being selfish and prolonging his career, like to retire from international football, because he wouldn't be human if he didn't cross his mind in a big way.
But he's got no move. So the idea they throw the Olympics at him as well, and he's sat in his furious, packing with a face on.
I think there's a legitimate argument for him to retire after that, though. Genuinely, he could. If Liverpool offer him a new deal, it could be in a sort of Fergie-esque way of here's your 3-year deal, mate, for the rest of your career. But
if you're Liverpool, you're saying that all day long, aren't you? You can have what you like if you don't play. We don't lose you for 6 weeks a season.
The next AFCON's in Marrakesh, I think, about 18 months away, something like that.
The issue is it might be getting moved because FIFA are a nightmare, so we're not even going to do that. That's worse than the Olympics chat for the Rob, to be honest with you.
And he might be 38 at that point. So
we'll worry about it later. Rob, Tyler Morton to Leipzig rumours, which is interesting because just the players has a level to go and Leipzig have put 20 million on him. There's a lot of talk he's very, very press resistant. I think he does well at Hull. there is, again, the same thing does sort of apply, which is Liverpool will want to, for me, a lot of this is down to literally where does Arne Slot think Curtis Jones plays, where does Arne Slot think Dom Szoboszlai plays. If he thinks that they play in the 3 in a 4-2-3-1, I think he might need some Tyler Morton around the squad. If they play in the 2 in a 4-2-3-1, you begin to sort of run out of options once you get into Bajcetic, Endo and McAllister as well in amongst all of that, and maybe Arnold.
I think, look, if he didn't play for Liverpool, I don't think anyone's particularly scouting Tyler Morton saying Liverpool need him in their squad. I think he's a good young player who should play Premier League level football in his career, but he's got helping Liverpool's PSR situation written all over it.
We haven't got a PSR situation.
Everyone does in a roundabout way. At some point, selling a homegrown lad for 15 million is always going to come in handy. Let's put it this way: you'd rather have the option than not. I'm not damning him. I just don't think he's going to play first team football for Liverpool. There's nothing that encourages me. I'm delighted to be wrong, because if we had a team full of homegrown kids, that's brilliant. But I don't think it's going to happen with Tyler. But I think Leipzig would be a hell of a move for him, and that would bring forward the likelihood that I'd be wrong.
I think people sleep on him a little bit, because I don't think there's a ton of good number 6s. You know, he's English. He plays in big games when his first time before he goes out on loan. I think he plays the Champions League against AC Milan. Sure, he played against Arsenal as well.
Plays against Tottenham,
right?
He looks a bit lost, to be fair.
Yeah,
what they do is they just drop loads of bombs and have Kane go up for him with headers.
Isn't
and
he taller now than that?
Yeah, but it's, I mean, I know this is me saying it's all right. He looks a bit lost, but basically they put Harry Kane on.
But I've seen Endo look lost this season, you know what I mean? Yeah. And this is the thing, it's like Liverpool have a number 6 problem. And I think if they were looking across the board, and not necessarily to make a big signing, but if they're looking across the board, who can we bring in the same way as Palace brought in Wharton, something like that, I think you'd be talking about the Tyler Morton, because reports were good coming out of Hull.
But then you've got a Gravenberch or a Curtis Jones going, what the actual fuck, you know?
He's different though. He's a sitter. No. He's a sitter.
Well, I mean,
but this is back to where they're going to play, and we don't know that yet. Like, I think if they're looking to move Morton on, it suggests that maybe someone who we haven't described as a sitter is like at least one is likelier to be sitting. Yeah. If you see what I mean, I think if they are comfortable doing that.
And if anyone else wants to take over from the Tyler Morton, chair fan club, you're more than welcome to have it off me. I'm just making the point.
It's also at Hull. Shaun was Carvalho. And I thought that there'd be more noise on that one way or the other by now. Sepp Vandenberg was loud, and now that's gone quiet as well. There's a little bit of a reality of June/July, I think, and it's compounded by the Euros. But I was sort of thinking Carvalho and Vandenberg's futures may well be sorted out by now. Doesn't look like there's any urgency.
Yeah, I think what you've just said spot on. We are in almost that sort of barren period, aren't we, between where it's like everyone's watching the Euros, all of the agents are probably out at the Euros, so they're all looking after the sort of bigger clients, or if you want to call them that. And I just generally think that apart from sort of behind closed doors phone calls, there's not that much, not many deals getting done really at this period. Certainly none that you can sort of look at and say, oh yeah, that's happening with regards to those two lads. I think Carvalho one is quite interesting because there was obviously quite a lot of noise around there, wasn't there, during the season? I think there was quite a bit of talk around, what was going to be happening. Obviously, he comes back out and then goes back out on loan, all that type of thing. But it's a difficult one because he's clearly brought in my opinion, to actually play a part. I don't think he was brought in to come in and just sort of be used, maybe for PSR reasons, who knows. But I think he was...
Or just money.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So I can see a scenario where he maybe does have another loan spell and then he comes back, maybe. I don't know. I don't think he was particularly bad when he was playing for us. I think he was a decent prospect. He looked good. Klopp used him quite a bit. It's just unfortunate that the season he was around was a pretty bad season for us, wasn't it?
Is he going to be there first day of pre-season? He's not away with anyone, is he?
No,
he's Portuguese, isn't he?
Portuguese,
yeah. That's on such things to careers can turn. I think he's likely to be there day one with Slot. He only has to. There's little purple patches out at Hull. It only has to continue before. And new managers are impressionable managers. There's no getting away from that. And he might start the season, but I can foresee a situation where he starts the season, he does all right, but by January he's long gone.
I like the idea that new managers are impressionable. Sorry, I like the idea that new managers are impressionable managers. I knocked my microphone. I was that pleased with it. No, I love it. No, I love it. I love it as a sentence. I love it as a sentence. New managers are impressionable managers. You can mould the bastards like fucking clay.
Well, they just they're waiting to be impressionable. Always impressing.
Yeah.
There's a naivety to a new manager.
He was 10 minutes early there, wasn't he? Excellent stuff. Good on him. Eager, paying full attention in the team meetings. I like him. No, genuinely, with it 100%. It goes back to the idea of the clean slate. I once had that conversation with Rory Smith. The idea that the clean slate, that loads of people saying there's a clean slate and everyone acts like it's good, but there's a number of players who are a bit like, no, I liked my slate. Do not tell me there's a clean slate.
I think that, with such going back to Salah going to the Olympic stuff, I think that's why he'll be fuming to go, because I think he will want to go and impress Slot more than anyone else. I think, even though his slate is pretty good.
What a slate!
He's got quite a decent slate. I think he'll want to show that. Look, I'm still the man here. I'm still the main man, and my standards are this high. Like you might have, managed in the Dutch league or whatever. Wait until you see this. I think there'll be an element of that with Salah.
Absolutely. We'll move on to, you mentioned the PSR thing a couple of times, Rob. Just to sort of sum up. As a bit of a catch-up, there's the clubs that are looking to seem eager to do business, seem eager to do it off the back of the PSR question. I think there's something interesting in this where I think there's a lot of people who are rightly, understandably saying this all feels a little bit dodgy and feels a little bit sort of self-serving, and I think that I don't think you can get away from that on the one hand. On the other hand, where I'm slightly sympathetic. I mean, I'm not overwhelmed with sympathy. Don't get me wrong, because able to put themselves in this position in the first place. But there may well be a thing where one of the reasons why all these clubs are looking to do all this business with each other is they're ringing other clubs up and they're saying we're not doing it until July the 1st. To be honest with you, because we've got no need to, we don't want to, there's no rush, we're looking to sort a few things out, we've got a new manager in, or we've been sorting out Ten Hag, or do you know what I mean? Like, I do think there is a little bit of a thing there where, without sort of coming over ridiculously soft about the whole situation, I'm just looking at it, and to me, it all looks a bit daft. To me, it all tells a bit of a story about mismanagement in the past and maybe mismanagement in the future. To me, they're all going to end up having to account for these players in the PSR calculation, the way in which it goes over the long run of time.
We talked about this the other day, Neil. I don't like the spectre, and it hasn't yet directly happened, of, we called it the diddle, but clubs doing effective swap deals where they exalt the value of players as a ruse round it. Because if ever there's an act of bad faith in the spirit of laws that they all voted in, well, the majority of them voted in, this is an example, and it's really insidious.
Good faith has long left town.
But good faith in a room of 20, if bad faith in a room of 20 is seriously bad faith, I think, and it's not right at all. Look, we haven't got an egregious example of it yet, but there's bad smells around.
I'm enjoying how angry people are getting about Lewis Dobbin. I didn't expect Lewis Dobbin ever to be that prominent in my life. I can't.
It's like Watergate already.
I can't get cross about Lewis Dobbin. There's lots of things pertaining to Everton Football Club that will wind me up. Lewis Dobbin is never going to number amongst them.
Yeah, that's what. But then again, Chelsea and the Chelsea Martson deal, I don't know. You feel there's things brewing around that.
But Martson, he had a clause with Dortmund at 35 million.
They could close this loophole. I thought, if I'm being too naive about it. The loophole that occurs is because you buy a player and you can amortise his value over the life of his contract. Therefore, you buy a player for 50 million on a 5-year deal, you only book him as a 10 million spend year one. But if you sell a homegrown prospect for 30 million, he's a full 30 million. Not entirely sure the rationale of those two things being treated separately. If you actually kill the amortisation clause and you just said, well, if you sell one for 30 at a profit and you buy one in for 50,
they'd have to vote and agree it.
Well, yeah, okay, go for it.
Two, also, in the past at least, I'm not quite sure what will happen moving forward, but in the past at least, this has also corresponded with the way UEFA do it. One of the bits of this that's missed, I've been quite annoyed with the in terms of, if you want the list of bits that have pissed me off, Aston Villa moaning's pissed me off, and the reason why is because, lads, you've just got in the Champions League, they've got the rules as well, and trust me, they're not the Premier League. Their rules are their rules. Now, where the punishments are in the Champions League, it's likelier because you can't do points deduction season on season, but the UEFA will just get to the point with you where they'll go, well, we don't want you to compete. if you continually take the piss. Now, I think Villa are a long way off that because it's the first time they've been back in Europe, but my point is more UEFA have got rules, and these rules are aligned, but UEFA's rules are changing, and it becomes football costs, a percentage of football costs versus your overall turnover. So I wonder whether or not that might close that loophole, if you see what I mean, i.e. your football costs are just your football costs. It might be that it doesn't, it might be that amortisation is still involved, but the point is that I think that the Premier League will end up just basically shaping on whatever UEFA do, because at least theoretically Premier League clubs want to get into European football, and they've got to therefore demonstrate that they're going to play by European rules, if you see what I mean.
I think this is prompting the greater need for reform of the transfer market as much as anything else, because I think if you view football as businesses, there's huge uncertainties now for clubs around this. Everton, the likes of Everton, moaned that they planned to sell a player at such and such value but couldn't get that value. So the market was hugely unpredictable to them, even if you take them at face value. So I don't know. I'd like to go to a situation, perhaps America. I'm never sure if American sports are the same, are following these models or not, but there seems to be more capping of transfer fees, capping of wages, that sort of thing goes on in sports.
They have a luxury tax, though.
Well, okay, but I still find it weirdly obscene that we're looking at, oh God, he's got a release clause, he hasn't. So one player's a virtual prisoner, another can get away. All these kind of uncertainties within the market, whilst they can be fun to speculate around, I don't think help the sport, don't think help clubs plan financially, I don't think help players plan their lives for their families. I think there needs to be a reform so that almost everyone has a release clause. I'd like to see that without getting into mega chats. I think everyone should have a release clause. Maybe you get transfer mark to give the values or what have you. Wage cap, I don't know. Once upon a time there was.
Intercali is free.
Yeah, well, somewhere along the line, it's not beyond the comprehension of man to do something like this.
Yeah, I suppose my take on it's a little bit sceptical, and without get me tin hat on, and it's genuinely a question to the room, is, do you believe that any of it's done in good faith? Because taking into consideration the sort of loopholes that I didn't know what PSR was 6 months ago, we do now, what we see at Everton, what we see across the board in football, and I would argue VAR to a degree. For me, it's just about creating new stories, creating new headlines, creating new things to talk about on shows like this one.
I don't think that's the case with the PSR thing. I think the VAR question's a little bit deeper. I think the PSR thing, and I think it's dead interesting. I'll come to Shaun on it then, Rob, and then we'll sort of sum up. It wasn't that long ago, everyone was saying, none of this has got any teeth. And what you're seeing now, whether you like the behaviour or not, is the behaviour of people who believe this is very real and don't want to be impacted by it. And you can say you don't like the behaviour, or you can say you don't.
Loads of narrative, though, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, it's all of that is the situation where it does create a little bit of narrative, and that's what people are talking about now. But that's almost because it's happening. So I think, for instance, the Chelsea, the Maatsen one's in inverted commas real. I think the Irobanum lads who Everton have bought from Villa, 9 million. I watched him last season. I think it's a pretty fair price. I think Everton have actually got a bit of a good player there, a good deal, and he might actually weirdly be of as much use to them as Onana was, and they can make money on Onana. I think that's proper footy. If you sort of see where it ends up, in my mind, from just having watched the players, I'm trying to think of the other ones that are sort of bouncing around. Like if Calvert-Lewin goes to Newcastle for however much because Everton want to move him on. I think Calvert-Lewin is
the other
sort
way.
of a thing. Well, I don't know if that'll happen, though, because it wouldn't surprise me if other clubs end up coming in for Minter, and then Newcastle might not be able to. I think some of them, I think you do have a little bit of an alarm above, and I think others, as I say, Martin's just played in a Champions League final.
Yeah.
I think if you could, he's a decent left-back, to say the least, so it's not mad. I just think with it, Shaun, where I end up is, I take the idea of, what concerns me, and I'm not arguing with Rob that in a number of ways the transfer market might be in need of reform, that sort of noise is going to start happening. You're seeing people like Martin Samuel write pieces that X is wrong and Y is wrong, and obviously it slows the market down a little bit. But I think everyone's just got to sort of live with it for a period and see what comes out the other side, because I think that's the missed part at the minute. This is now, these behaviours now are actually a corrector, A, acknowledgement that it's real, and B, actually a bit of a corrector. We fucked up a bit, we need to fix it, and then we're going to get back and live within the rules. Yeah. You can see it as abuse of the rules in a number of ways, and I understand why, and it sort of is. But I think the flip side of it is it's clubs almost going, right, we need to get real around this, and then arguably try and do it better afterwards, is what I think you're seeing.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think the reason why, it might look like people are doing it in bad faith is because at the end of the day, as well as being, football clubs and businesses in their own right, it's like any rules that are put in place that have, financial implications. People are paid a lot of money to work out how close to the line they can go. and without getting caught, or stay in a position where you're not abusing the rules, but you're making the most of them, if that makes sense. And I think that's why you'll see this type of thing where you go, oh, that feels a bit strange. But it's because the people are spending a lot of time looking at it because it's got financial implications. I think ultimately people are just never happy, are they? So I think no matter what the rules are, no matter what they look like, unless it's a sort of really straightforward, this is the one size fits all for everyone, there's always going to be people who aren't happy with how they are. So I actually do agree with you, Rob. I think there should be some reform of the transfer market because I think it's got a bit out of hand, and I'm sort of being one of my own people there about never being happy because I just do feel like there's always something to be feeling frustrated by. But yeah, I think I'm with you, Neil. I think we just need to see what comes out the other side.
I think everyone's just got to sort of swallow it. I think the transfer market will look like its normal self when you get the other side of the 1st of July, and then everyone's another window of getting used to it. Chelsea didn't buy anyone last January when everyone thought, oh, this will never end. I think Newcastle, people don't like this because the ownership, but I think Newcastle, to me, look like they are doing everything they can to stay compliant. Whether or not whether or not that sustains is a separate question. It's arguably more to do with Manchester City than it is anything else, Rob. But it looks to me from the outside like they are. Like I think what's difficult here is it's quite possible we might be, given where we necessarily could have been 3 years ago. I think what's difficult for people to maybe get on board with is we might actually be in the best of most possible worlds at this moment. It just also feels a bit shit and a bit tawdry at the same time.
Maybe. I just feel that it feels to me more than ever there's a lot of, although there's reasons for clubs to be selling, to comply with things, it feels there's a lot of blockage in the market. I don't know why. I think
everyone's waiting for July the 1st.
Yeah. I feel we're moving towards, the reason I talk about reform, I think we're moving towards, we've said this on the gutter shows, that it could be a season, especially for Liverpool again, of transfer of release clauses. It feels to me that's the only polite way to do business these days, is to go, there's the release clause, we all know where we are, let's just haggle around the payment terms and be gentlemen and get it done. And I think more and more that's going to dawn on clubs more and more. They go, why don't we just have a system around that and stop having this endless
Spain sort of did, but it was open to abuse, and they all went absolutely massive 800 million, and then someone paid Neymar.
These third-party values on the release clauses, and not clubs just going out saying, as you said, £1 billion. So it's not
I would actually put you in charge of it.
I'd put me in charge of it.
The gutter needs guttering.
Yeah, I'd put you in charge. From your office in Zurich.
Oh, absolutely.
The things you could achieve.
I think just sitting all day putting values on footballers is a life I could lead.
Thank you very much indeed to Ash O'Rourke, making all the images happen. If you watch it on YouTube, Andy Heaton behind the sound for the whole process. Thank you very much to Jake Nolan, to Shaun O'Donnell, and to Swiss Rob. It has been the Anfield Wrap this week. Take it easy.